Hello, everybody, and welcome back to 3-2 Brew. We have a league recap and a bit of, I guess you could call it deck tech, kind of. I just finished up the first ever pre-modern league on MTGO and kind of wanted to just go over my matches, how I felt like I lined up against them with this deck, and just kind of go over the deck to start with. So let's jump into the deck side of this. I played Green Red Ponza this week. This is from a list I found of a 2018 deck that originally had some Bloodbraid Elves and some other stuff in it. Within pretty much the creature package is what I primarily changed. I took a couple of their creatures out and stuck in some Gruul Spellbreakers as well as some Glorybringers to try and keep the pressure on with the Gruul Spellbreakers. I also like the flexibility. We'll talk about this card later. And the Glorybringer helps clean up some of that smaller stuff or some of the mid-sized stuff. We run two Chandras in here, which is just a fantastic kind of pseudo top end that can really get going, especially if you get to 7. Helps a lot on a stalled board. Arbor Elf combos with Utopia Sprawl. You got two Birds of Paradise. No 2-drops in the main board. Courser was a fun of one of. Love being able to play this card in a 60 card constructed. And the rest of this is kind of stock and standard. I got 6 actual land destruction spells, 3 bolts, 4 blood moons, running 21 lands in total with pretty much all basics outside of basic permanents. I got 8 total fetches. Sideboard is what I did a lot of change to. So the Grafdigger's Cage, I brought in, thought was important. I left the Abrade and Ancient Grudge. Believe I dropped an Ancient Grudge. Added 2 Pyroclasms. Believe I dropped 1 Skoos, 1 Gods, and 1 Sphinx, and I believe added 2 Trinisphere maybe. The allure of this deck, just so everybody kind of has an understanding, I'm going to do a more in-depth dive on some of the pieces I really enjoyed later. But the reason I picked up this deck originally is because in pre-modern, I just built mono green Ponza, both in paper and online. So I was kind of on a Ponza train. I found these deck lists. I really liked it. It played a lot of cards at that time that I just never got to play, but I always wanted to. I always heard people talking about, oh, I miss old modern. I would hear Seth from MTG Goldfish talk about it a lot and say, like, modern back in 2019, old modern, this and that. I always makes me think, like, I missed the old Kanye. But there's a lot of cards I never really got to play with. And one thing that drew me to this deck was Blood Moon. Always wanted to play a Blood Moon deck, especially in 60 card constructed, but none of the formats I played, which was really just Pioneer, allowed it. I could also play 3-ball in this deck. That was in the sideboard, I believe, originally as either a one of. I love 3-ball. Trinisphere, for everyone's knowledge. It's a card that I think is super sick. I've always wanted to play it coming from a heavy EDH background. It just didn't really make a ton of sense normally. So I wanted to play 3-ball. And then, I don't know if I mentioned it, but Bloodbraid Elf was originally in this list, and that's another thing that drew me to it. I've heard a ton of great things about Bloodbraid Elf, but it's just not a card I could ever really play. Overall, high macro level view of this, what we're trying to do is blow up lands, limit resources, and lock people under a moon when we're able to while we ramp out and kind of drop some big fatties out. This deck has 2 lines. Really, it's more of a tempo deck than anything. It can play a control game if you have a really heavy Stone Rain and Blood Moon and removal based hand. But you can also just play like a Turbo Glorybringer, Turbo Inferno Titan, kind of an aggro ramp line. So that's why I think it gives you some tempo. I personally would put it as a tempo control deck or tempo prison deck, because you can lock people under Blood Moon. I have Trinispheres in the side. I have quite a few hate pieces in the sideboard, but it's hit or miss. So let me now go over the actual matchups and just give a couple thoughts on it. My first round was against a blue-red Baral Storm deck that I went 2-0 and took the W in. This was really kind of not an unfun matchup, but my opponent just had a lot of really bad mulligans. They kept, I believe, game 1 was like 2 lands, or it was a 1-lander, It was 1 or 2 lands and like 4 cantrips. And I think I got a turn 2 Stone Rain off. I think I had a follow-up Stone Rain of some kind, and it kind of just locked them out of the game. And I believe they went to like a really, really deep mulligan on game 2, and I just kind of swept them up. So it was kind of a non-game. I think that Storm we have some play against, and this is going to be for any deck that doesn't run natively a ton of lands. I don't know what Storm's land count is. My guess is it's probably somewhere in the range of 18 to 20 because they're going to see so many cards. They don't want to continually draw lands. It could be even lower. It could be 17 to 19. But if you can take them off those resources and negate their early game ability to set up, I think it's really, really, really positive here. What I really enjoy, this was also a game where we were on the play. Actually, my first 3 matches were on the play. So I got kind of lucky in that sense. Round 2 was another 2-0 win versus Boggles. So this was a matchup where I think my opponent first game went down to 5. I didn't know what they were on. I thought maybe dredge or something. And I just kind of kept them on low resources. They never really were able to deploy. They got a Boggles out relatively early, but I was able to just limit resources and blow up lands and everything and just kind of kept them off. I was on the play again for that first game. So I kept them low resources and just continued to drop threats while kind of negating what they could do and just kind of swept them up. Game 2, they were able to get 2 enchantments on a Boggles by turn 2. I believe first and second game here I might have Blood Mooned them, can't remember, but Blood Moon was definitely an all-star throughout this league. I ended up blowing up a bunch of their lands, and I started to build out Glory Bringers, which the Boggles couldn't really get through effectively. They had Hexproof, they had a turn 1, and the game 2 they had a turn 0, I guess, Leyline. So they were Hexproof. So there was some interesting stuff going on, but I eventually resolved an Inferno Titan, and they decided to scoop it up on low resources because they just realized they couldn't outpace it. I think they had like a 5-4 or something. When I say they had like a Grish Boon and maybe a the 1 mana +1/+1 for all enchantments or something. Can't remember exactly. But I took a win in that second match. I'll do a recap at the end of this and kind of just discuss the concept of some of this stuff. So round 3 was against blue-white control. I went 2-1 in this. I was on the play again. This was a really long and grindy matchup. The second game of this is the one that I lost, and it was so much fun. It was an extremely long, grindy game. We were just trading off planeswalkers, trading off creatures. They had a ton of Path to Exile. It was removal heavy. There wasn't even that many counters, but eventually got to a point where like it was blue-white control, but it was a miracle build. That's another thing I forgot to mention. So they miracled me away a couple times with the white miracle, and then I still had some action left in my deck. We were both really, really low, probably close to 20 cards apiece, maybe a little bit above, and they resolved a Jace, and I had just lands in my hand. And I was pretty much Jace locked then for the rest of the game if I would have continued. Ended up scooping and then taking the third game down. It was a great match. I had a lot of fun against that. I think that blue-white Miracles control is such a really, really cool build. So I was happy to take that. Round 4 was against IB True. Remember the name because we went directly from playing pre-Fire Modern to playing pre-Modern. And both matches I got beat up. This was round 4. I lost 1-2. And they were on white, black, red. So Mardu Pyromancer. This deck was sick. I was not on the play here, and I think it hurt me really bad. So I was on the draw, and first game I dropped. Bedlam Reveler is just a card that this deck cannot deal with. There is no good solution to it or anything, so it was really, really tough with regards to that. But first game I dropped. Second game, I believe I was able to keep him off of resources while deploying stuff, and it kind of let me get ahead when I was on the play and turbo out a bit. So I was able to cap that out, and then game 3 was just a nasty. I believe he had double Bedlam Revelers by like a relatively early turn with some flashback. He had some lootings as well. that just it went crazy. He double looted one turn, faithless looting. So yeah, that was a really, really tough match to lose. Game 3, I believe for that, I kept a no red hand by accident for mana, and I had like 4 red spells. I just like misread my hand when I clicked accept. I really, really punted that. I think that that's a matchup where it's not horrid, and I think that there's quite a bit of play here. It just depends on your draw and what you get through. I personally really enjoy that matchup. I had a great time. I think there were some really good decision trees, and I think it's a winnable match. I don't know if it's 50-50. I kind of doubt it. I think it favors them a bit because they have some control and they got some stuff to gunk up the boards with if the Pyromancer ever resolves and gets a couple spells off. They have the ability also to gunk up the board with Lingering Souls, which then pumps everything else. So, yeah, overall, that deck was sick. Round 5 then? I went 2-0 in a win versus Blue Green Titan Amulet. First round, I think the first game, I believe they went to, it was like, forget what it was. They went to, I think, 5. And then they had a Summer Bloom. They only dropped in like 2 or 3 additional lands on like turn 3. But by then, I believe I had actually Stone Ring them like 2 or 3 times, which sounds stupid against a lands heavy deck, but it's what I had. I didn't know what they were on. I was able just to deploy more threats than they were able to and just kind of close out the game faster. And then game 2 post board, I had a really, really weird sideboard. Completely forgot that this was like Amulet Titan. And I didn't bring in any artifact removal, but I brought in, I was afraid of a Zenith line, like a Green Sun Zenith drop in. And I was like, maybe they like ramp to a Green Sun Zenith. I might have seen a deck earlier with it, but I brought in my cages. And game 2, I was on the draw, obviously. Had a turn 2 Blood Moon, which was just nasty against that deck. Believe I had a Stone Ring that came down as well. Was it a turn 2 Blood Moon? It was a very early Blood Moon. I know I had a Stone Ring. I think I took them off of a Scryland or something early. Maybe the Blood Moon came around like turn 3 or turn 4 or something. But it was a Blood Moon that just completely locked them out. I believe I dropped, I think it was turn 3 or turn 4 because I think I had like a Growth Spiral or a a Utopia Sprawl here on one of my forests, and I believe I dropped Blood Moon directly into, I brought in Grafdigger's Cages, afraid of Green Sun Zenith. So I just continued to deploy. All they had was mountains, and they finally found a basic forest, and then they went Green Sun Zenith for 3 with my cage out. And I don't know if they did it just to show me they had Zenith or what, but they just put GG's after a couple seconds in the chat, and I don't know if it was like a kind of a shame concession or whatnot, as Bosch and Roll always mentions. But yeah, the Grafdigger's Cage actually was a right play. I did terrible sideboarding against that. And then my 6th round, my final round, was a loss of 0-2, which is my only 0-2 of all my rounds here, which is for me personally rather rather impressive. As we see, 3-2 brew is what I'm aiming for. That was against Death and Taxes White Black Eldrazi. I never played this deck. I've looked at the list a couple times, and I just didn't really know how it would function. It looked kind of like clunky and just, a bit mismanaged, but overall, I love that deck. It took me apart. I thought it was awesome. It's a deck where I feel like you really got to know the meta, but I believe I was on the play first game as well and just got cooked. That was a really, really bad, nasty lockout, and just so sick to play against. I am very interested in that Death and Taxes deck. Overall, I went 4-2 on my record for matches and 9-5 game record. So winning a good percentage there. Let me pull it up real quick. This would be, 9 divided by 14. So I'm winning 64% of my games that I played, which is good, I think. Overall, let's talk about the deck and the way that it performs and the concepts I kind of have around it now. For decks with low land counts, if you can just get a couple of hate pieces with some early ramp, they're cooked. Like, against something like you read Baral Storm Boggles, those are just those two types of decks where they're, relatively low land counts. It just destroys them. A Blood Moon can often lock them out just in itself, but if you're able to get like one or two Stone Rains down semi early, they may never recover. They just don't have the lands in their deck to dig out of it. It's kind of funny because we're the same way at 21. And I just feel like maybe our land count's too low, but it's a whole different story. I really was shocked with the blue white control matchup. This deck just has legs. It has the ability to go mid range. It can play kind of wherever you need it to play at. Just from the way that it's spread out and the big drops it has on the top end, it's really, really nasty. I think Chandra is a fantastic mirror breaker or stalemate breaker against blue white control. Obviously, they have Jace, so that's a bit of an issue in itself, but her being able to ramp you, clear any kind of like celestial colonnade if it was for some reason popping up, exile, get card advantage. I really like Chandra in that matchup. Inferno Titan was sweet. There was a lot of really, really good cards. This is a matchup though where you take out your Molten Rains and your Stone Rains and you bring in some stuff like a Braids if you're fearing some kind of, any kind of like even Snapcaster type of concept. I like to bring in Scoos as well. It's just incremental life gain. There's a couple pieces. I think 3-ball there I brought in as well. It just has some run against their cantrips they have. So, but yeah, blue white control was, we had more game than I initially thought we would. I thought we'd have no game against blue white control, to be like entirely honest with you. I did not expect us to have the ability to have legs to go into the late game against them, or even the mid, like a mid to late game. I thought we were just kind of cooked, but we have enough action with 20 creatures, and if you side correctly, you can have, 24 creatures. It changes into a whole different deck. +2 plus a planeswalker, which is like basically another big bomb creature in itself. So there's a lot of hits in this deck, a lot of good things. I was shocked. I think that we have a really good matchup against Pyromancer. This is another deck that I don't think we need to do a lot of Stone Raining and Molten Rain against after first game into the post board. I think that Pyroclasm is going to be an all-star here. Scavenging Ooze is something that I probably should have brought in. So I didn't respect Bedlam Reveler. Didn't really know what it did. Kind of forgot about it. I didn't respect it enough. I should have brought it in. Just eating away their graveyard is really nice. The issue is they have Fatal Push and Abrupt Decay. Sorry, not Abrupt Decay. They have Fatal Push, Path, all sorts of just really, really cheap, efficient removal. That takes care of a Scavenging Ooze. This white, black, red, this Mardu Pyromancer game really made me consider a Relic of Progenitus or Tormod's Crypt type of action. I think it's super valuable. I like Kitchen Finks against them a lot as well. If they want to, obviously it's really bad against Path, but 3 mana ETB, gain 2, not the worst. It's a 3-2 rate. If they want to path it, they can path it. If they don't, then they can kind of set up and do whatever they want to do for blocks and whatnot. So even if it gets, Fatal Push, it still comes back and gains 2. It's a really interesting decision there. Blue-Green Titan Amulet, we have a great sideboard for this. I think Grafdigger's Cage for just a Green Sun's Unit package that's currently allowed is great. And then we have a Braid and an Ancient Grudge. So that's just 5 automatic cards. And I think I might have brought in a 3-ball as well. Potentially some Kitchen Finks. So I think I brought in Cage and 3-ball, I want to say. Or, yeah, I think it was Cage and 3-ball, just to try and slow him down a little bit. It's a tough one. I don't really know how the sideboard with this again. The games are too quick, and I just don't know. And then Death and Taxes Eldrazi, I felt hopeless. Like I didn't have any kind of good answers to it. Didn't know how to board. I brought in I think 11 cards or something stupid. So yeah, I have no advice on Death and Taxes. We felt really, really, really soft to that deck. We have a lot of answers, but they just have too many lines, I think. So overall, let's talk about what I liked and disliked about this deck as a final recap here. I really enjoyed Arbor Elf and Utopia Sprawl. I think that's very powerful. It feels very good in this format. If they bolt the elf, that's a bit of a bummer, but you can still turn 2 Utopia Sprawl, have 2 mana up, and do something with it if you really want. You can deploy, a bolt plus a bop, or a bolt plus an elf, or a bolt plus another sprawl. So there's some stuff to do on turn 2. Birds of Paradise was a bit weak in this. It's very tough. Too many people just remember to bolt a bird. Sometimes elf can get away from it because you don't, turn 1 represent Utopia Sprawl. So hit or miss there. Corsair Crewfix is a really interesting card. I played this a couple times. I don't think that this is a bad card. I think it's well statted at a 2/4 for 3 mana, but being able to get the Oracle of Moldiah land off the top, but the additional 1 life instead of an additional land, especially at 3 mana rate, I think this should be explored more, personally. I wouldn't mind conceptually testing this a bit more. The biggest flex slot is this Gruul Spellbreaker. So I started right around this time. This was in the standard when I was playing. I used to play a standard deck with it on Arena. I love Gruul Spellbreaker. It's a bit of a pet card, but I also think it's powerful in this format. 3 mana with Riot, which lets you choose either a +1/+1 counter when it ETBs or haste. And it has Trample. Plus, when it's your turn, you and Gruul Spellbreaker have Hexproof. So this seems kind of mid when you first look at it, but it does a lot. It can have haste, it can have +1/+1. It comes native with Trample, so getting over like some of the Mardu Pyromancer tokens and stuff like that is really nice with this card in my personal opinion. So Gruul Spellbreaker's on the cutting floor right now. I'm not going to lie to you. I enjoyed it. It's very, very versatile, but I just don't know if it's what this deck wants as an additional 3-drop. The replacement for it would be a Magus of the Moon. Let me pull that up. I think Magus of the Moon has quite a bit of run here. Non-basic Lancer Mounds for a 3-drop. It's a 2/2. It's an additional Blood Moon. I wouldn't mind having 3 additional Blood Moons in here that I could side out into other stuff. So Magus is what I'm considering swapping out for a Gruul Spellbreaker, but I do have a lot of love for this card. Tireless Tracker is powerful. This card's so good. If it can stick around, if you're playing against a deck that just lets Tireless Tracker do its thing, their goose is cooked. There's nothing they can do about it. I love this card. I'm so excited I got a format to play this in. Like, I couldn't really ever play it in Pioneer because it was just out power crept by then, by the time I joined, so love this. Pia and Kieran Nalar. Now, I never played with this card before, but good golly, this card does work. The ability to stick 2 flyers in the air for 4 mana with a 2/2 body, just, I can't overstate how sick it is. There's a lot of play with the artifact. There's synergy with Tireless Tracker, with their clue tokens, so I really, really like this. I didn't understand this card when I first built this deck. I was like, why is this here? What's the importance of it? What's the value? I now see it. Like, I have been brought to the truth on this deck, so I really enjoy it. As a 2/2, it's nice. Glorybringer. This was an addition by me. I think I had seen a couple of 2019 lists with Glorybringer in it. I love Glorybringer. Huge love for me. 5 mana, flying, haste, 4/4, super sick. The Exert is not non-zero. I would have loved to have this card against Death and Taxes. And just, when they slam their turn 3 Thought Not Seer, and I draw Glorybringer next turn, if the world's perfect, I then slam Glorybringer, exert it, kill their Thought Not Seer, draw a card, and deal 4 to them. Or I take out like a Flicker Wisp or something crazy. So, yeah, I love this card. I think it's an absolute house. I believe a 2/of in this deck is not non-zero. I like it, I think, more than the next card, Stormbreath Dragon. Stormbreath Dragon's sick that I get to play it. It's pro-white, flying, haste for 5 mana, mythic 4/4. But the monstrosity just doesn't really get there for me. It's almost like a win more, kind of. I think Glorybringer just has more versatility. Stormbreath Dragon has more text on it. But personally, I think that Glorybringer is a bit more dominant, and I would consider dropping a Stormbreath Dragon to add like a Tireless Tracker or a Skoo's main board or something. And then the card that you'll see the art for from this video is Inferno Titan. I am just beyond thrilled that this is a format I can play an Inferno Titan in, and it's not trash, in all honesty. The Titan cycle is really, really sick, but this card is just awesome. I love Inferno Titan. I never got to play with it. I've seen other people play it before. It's it does work. The attack and ETB, I did a lot of searching to try and replace it. Didn't know if there was a better card at that slot or whatever. There's not. The ETB Bolt, it sits there for a turn, so it doesn't do anything right away, but the removal in this format is good, but it's not amazing for a 6-drop, especially at a 6/6 body. So getting the Bolt, and then if you untap, you have fire breathing on top of a Bolt whenever you attack. So yeah, no, this card is awesome. I love it. The art's fantastic. It's iconic. You know, it gets the people going. So looking through there, that's really all I have. Chandra's just a house. I don't know if I touched on her again, but the land destruction side of this deck that makes it Ponza is classic. I really like Molten Rain. It is a bit tough to get double red sometimes, but I notice myself setting up double red more than anything else, sometimes more than double green, because a lot of the stuff you ramp into is double red. Pia and Kiran, Glorybringer, Stormbreath Dragon, Inferno Titan, Chandra. I think that you could do a 3/3 split here and get away with it pretty well. This is kind of giving me pillage vibes, where sometimes you'll go heavier pillage and you will a Stone Rain in pre-modern, just because of versatility that it gives you. But this time it's more of the damage. So I think 6 is a good mix for this. I wouldn't go more, I don't think. We just couldn't fit it in. Lightning Bolt is the most underperforming card in this deck, I'd say. It doesn't really do a whole lot. This is another flex slot. I might just, another iteration, leave Gruul Spellbreaker and just drop the 3 bolts and stick in 3 Magus and just rock it. The Bolt always kind of felt dead. I wasn't closing out games. This isn't burned, you know? I wasn't going down to too many nail biters with life total. I either kind of just got stalled out by removal, heavy removal, or I just kind of got, you know, over the top of them or underneath them, really. So yeah, Lightning Bolt's a flex slot for me at this moment. And then Utopia Sprawl's an all-star of this deck. Banging art, by the way. Ron Spears, absolute legend. But yeah, this does work. I love the versatility of this. Can't, you know, explain enough how cool it is. Same here with Blood Moon. Blood Moon was so much fun. It was super powerful in this league. I think it's going to be powerful in the format. Taking people off of dual lands with a fetch land set up and, you know, shutting off fetch lands and stuff. It's just absolutely disgusting. For this lineup, previous list I had was still 21 lands, but it had like a Kessig Wolf run and only 3 stomping grounds, I believe. I think I took that and something else out. I think I might have upped the forest count and added a stomping ground somewhere along the lines. And I also consolidated the fetch lands. I know that's more of like a Pithing Needle hit, but I didn't have Misty Rainforest and stuff, so I don't really worry about it. But I like the land layout. And let's talk about the sideboard. I think the sideboard's a really interesting talking point for this. Grafstigger's Cage is fantastic. This hits Green Sun Zenith, this hits Dredge, this hits any Reanimator plan. It'll hit, you know, anything you're going to cast. It hits Cascade as well. Like, it hits everything. So I think Grafdigger's Cage, and F. Pauls had said this, and I thought this for a while. I had it actually in my deck beforehand. This is going to be an all-star in this format. Love this card. The 2 Abrade, 1 Ancient Grudge split is great. This kind of gives you pseudo 4 with Ancient Grudge on the flashback here. So this is kind of a 3-card, 4-hit destroy artifact. The only 1 grudge instead of like a 2 grudge, 1 Abrade kind of split. I like the versatility of 3 damage to target creature. 3 damage hits a lot of good creatures in this format. So I like having the option to blast a creature that I need to get blasted out, essentially. Pyroclasm has good run in some matchups. This is a very conditional card. And this is one I think I'm going to tinker around with. It doesn't hit everything. So like for my matchup, it doesn't really clear Boggles unless I get it on like turn 2 and I'm on the play. And U-White Control doesn't do much. It's very good against Pyromancer in some regards, but when they hit their top end of Bedlam Reveler, it's just chilling. But it takes out a lot of the tokens and can clean it up. No play against Amulet Titan and not a ton of play against Death and Taxes, I found out. So it's a very tough one. I think that maybe I might drop down to 1 Pyroclasm and up the Anger Gods to 3. I'm just going to jump to Anger Gods because we're on that topic. This is a great card. 3 damage, exile stuff, super relevant against Dredge. I saw it in a testing game where I think it wiped up 3 amalgams and 3 narcomoebas. So there's definitely run for anger. I think this is going to be an all-star sideboard card in this format. I think there's just enough things that it hits. If you just look at my deck, that on most cases hits 4, 6, 7, 10, 13, 13 plus 2, 15. It's going to hit 15 of my 20 creatures. Just raw. Obviously, Tire Tracker should be growing and whatnot. But if you turn 3 versus me, my goose is cooked. Like, there's nothing I can do about it. So I think that Anger of the Gods is going to have a ton of play in this format. I really like it. I think we might go up to 3 here and 1 Pyroclasm just for my split. I like having the splits for 2 straight up graveyard slash, unfair magic hate, 4 artifact hates, and then 4 creature hate cards. And then additional Scavenging Ooze is just also a card I love, by the way. I have your LGS old frame version of it, but the impact of Scavenging Ooze cannot be overstated. This is debatably a main board card. I would consider putting it main board if I didn't go Maguses or wanted to swap out the Gruul Spellbreakers. Basically, if I take 6 out, it's probably going to be 3 Magus and 3 Skoos that goes in. It just does too much work. There's too much stuff going on in the graveyard right now, and it does a lot. So it's also able to eat up instants and sorcery, which I didn't think about against like a Bedlam Reveler. It does a lot. So huge fan of it. Think that it needs more reps than what we have currently in this deck. Kitchen Finks as well. Kitchen Finks is just a great versatility card. I like it as an additional creature, but I really love it as life gain, and it just gains you 2. It can basically buy back a shock land or whatnot for life. The fact that it's an oof is sick. Iconic art. I love this card. Shadow Moor, just chef's kiss. Let's also talk about how sick old logos used to be. Just need to put that out there. But Kitchen Finks is fantastic. I see this becoming a bang-up card. I think this is going to be something that we leave as a 2 of in this deck, but it's going to have certain matchups where it just absolutely gobbles you up. It's a great burn deterrent and everything. So, love this card. Burn knows I'm good way to really deal with it. Sometimes they run past, sometimes they don't. And then Trinisphere. Sorry. Trinisphere is the final card here. I think out the sideboard, Trinisphere has a lot of play. It's nasty against Storm, I believe, in my personal opinion. Has some run against blue-white control. I think Pyromancer, Mardu Pyromancer, if you can get like a turn 2 Trinisphere down and just shut down a lot of the fatal pushes and stuff like that, it really slows them down, and I love that. Titan, it doesn't have a whole lot of play against, nor does it for Death and Taxes, but I love Trinisphere. I think anything that's trying to do stuff unfair or be too fast, just it has so much play against. So I highly recommend checking out Trinisphere in the sideboard here. Closing remarks and thoughts. Do I recommend this deck to someone? Yes, I would definitely recommend this if you enjoy resource denial and a bit of a tempo control option. I would highly recommend this. I've never played Old Modern. I did some testing with this. I think I had like 6 or 7 matches. So I wasn't completely new coming into the league, but I'm new to Modern as a whole. Like new Modern, Old Modern, any of it. I've watched some Bosch and Roll videos, but it's not a format I'm like deep in. I don't know all the cards and whatnot. I don't have nostalgia for this period. I have, fake nostalgia basically. I've always wanted to play it, but never could. This is it. Like, I think this deck is cool. I think there's a place for this deck in the meta. I think it's going to use some tuning. There's probably some kind of Green Sun Zenith package that should be baked into this. I just didn't bake it in. But I really enjoyed this deck. I think it's a great starter deck as well. Let me quickly go to change price settings. Go up to Card Hoarder and go back for us here. This deck is running as 25.67. These are the exact versions I have online, so these aren't even always the cheapest versions. This deck is sub $30, and you're going to get some absolute, like, your land base here. You round out, 2 sets of fetches plus one of the shock lands. Cage is going to be a staple. Moon's going to be a staple. I could see Sprawl becoming a low-key staple in the future. Same with Arbor Elf. A lot of the other stuff isn't. I think Chandra will be a sideboard piece often. But, Cage, Abrade, Grudge, these are all cheap, but Scavenging Ooze, this whole sideboard is going to be, I think, semi-staples through. So you get a lot of bases for stuff. I could then build off of this and build another red green deck, or I could go into like a green heavy deck and have the fetch land options and stuff like that. So I recommend this to everyone. I have put up good results. It felt pretty good. I think there's a lot of room for improvement still and a lot of room for testing. Don't know if I'll do that. I kind of have fallen in love with a couple of decks. I'm looking at Affinity. I have built the Rock out, but I think I'm just going to wait on that. I'm probably going to be between Affinity and Death and Taxes for my next deck, but I'm just going to give it some thought, and I got a whole week to look after it. I got to prep for a pre-modern event this weekend, so I'll be putting some time into that. But hope you guys all enjoy. I know it's a bit long-winded, but I kind of wanted to just go through and talk about my experience. I want to start doing more of these, whether I put up good or bad results. So hope you all enjoyed. I appreciate you tuning to the end. Till next time, cheers.